Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. All right, let me just go ahead and adjust this. Cool. And all right, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Wild and Precious Optimal Living Show. Thank you so much for your patience as well, too. We had a little bit of technical difficulties this morning, but it's so great to be able to get started, and I'm super grateful to be able to have a beautiful guest on my show today. And you know, we are going to dive deep because this is a really needed time to be able to start to address the chatter in our minds, right? And there's a lot of different dynamics right now, as there's a lot of uncertainty in the air about our own personal health. There's a lot of uncertainty as our children are going back to school, and just finding that rhythm that feels in sync within your own family unit and also within the community that you're in. And so this is a much needed, I feel like, conversation to be able to open up and to be able to have someone who is so well-rounded in her systems and her skills and her teachings to be able to bring in some insight for us today. So for those of you who's new to Wild and Precious Optimal Living, welcome to the show and tuning in. And this really show is about all aspects of health. Health is a choice. Happy health and great health is by choice. It's not by chance. We don't just wait for our health to happen, right? And you have this one wildly intelligent body, this one beautiful mind, and our body is constantly adapting, very resilient. And so this show is about bringing you tools to help enhance the quality of your health, the quality of your mind, the quality of your relationships, not only with yourself, but also especially with your family, because that is our children are our future as well too. So a lot of it is being able to, how do we take care of ourselves and in turn model that for our children? And I think I have a 4-year-old, and more than ever now, it's so true, and it's always my little one is always a teacher for me to remind me, you know, how am I making my choices? So, you know, with that said, you know, I want to be able to thank our sponsor, NeuroSolutions, for making the show happen. You know, for those of you who've never heard of the word photobiomodulation, photobiomodulation is laser therapy, low-level laser therapy. And I have brought with me my little laser from NeuroSolutions. It's the Avant laser, and it looks like a little flashlight. I really especially love it because there's a lot of great potential. I use it at home, and I use it with my practice members in my office as well too. So for those of you who's never heard of laser or cold laser or low-level light therapy or photobiomodulation, they're all the same words to describe the effectiveness of helping with healing, stimulating healing. It's really powerful in our office to actually create more energy production as we're rehabbing the brain, and at the same time it's very powerful for decreasing inflammation in your system, for helping relief in symptoms, and it is powerful in generation of energy. So so it guides your at the cellular level your cells to better integrate and utilize oxygen to better produce ATP, which is your simple units for energy that you use in your body, the current exchange of energy in your body. So I really love the NeuroSolutions team as well too. They're very focused on educating home family users as well as professionals in how to use the tool effectively, because there is support that we need in how to use this tool. It's so effective in everything else. I mean, just last night I had a little bit of a headache, and just a great little home tool that I have. I don't really use any medication. It's just a very great non-invasive tool. So thank you so much for NeuroSolutions for your support in this show. And so now we get to dig in deep. We get to bring in our guest, Kia Miller, with us today. And you know, what an honor, because I've been practicing yoga and for a long time, and I use Glow, which is a really great app, and that I've been utilizing. It's been supporting me through pandemic all last year, and even before, as I was going through postpartum and getting back into my body. And the one teacher I always went to, I've been going to, is Kia Miller. So I wanted to reach out to her because in her, just the little classes that you have, Kia, you share so much wealth. There's just always something so empowering to help with the day, and it's not just the movement, it's the magic that's all within, intertwined within. So thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's just so a delight to be here, and I'm so happy to hear that you've been using the classes and that they've been so positively impacting you.
Yes.
It's just such a gift, really, to share practices that I've learned that can help, much like the little device you've been talking about can help. These are all ways to ensure that we can walk through life in a more optimal way.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I think for some of our members or listeners who are tuning in, they may have never practiced yoga before, right? And I'd like to take our conversation to more of like the beginner level of someone who, you know, is considering looking for a system that may be more well-rounded, not just fitness oriented, but why dig into yoga, and more specifically, why Kundalini? And I know that you bring in a wealth of other, your own personal practice into it, and I'd love for you to speak more on Radiant Body as well too in your program. So I'd like to take our conversation for our families who are very novel, new to this, and so maybe we can start with just Kia, like what is your calling right now and how you're teaching? Because I know you have different programs going on right now. What's your calling and what's your mission right now? In working with people?
Well, my calling and my mission is to help people to cut through the dominant emotional and mental states that we find ourselves in that are not helpful. And you referenced these at the beginning of the call when you were talking about the fear and the uncertainty, and also the negativity, and also the polarization that's happening in our society right now. It started, you know, with the election, as the elections do, but it continued on now with the whole health debate and you know, responses around this pandemic. And so to me, it feels the most important thing right now is to help people to cut through that dominant energetic state, because what happens when we are living with this underlying frequency of fear or uncertainty, or there's a contracted state, or there's an unexpressed anger, or there's generally confusion, or maybe even despondency, and definitely anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What happens is that all of our body systems start to work in an inoptimum way. We become a little less vital, a little less clear, a little less connected to our innate intelligence and wisdom from within. And then what happens is we can tend to rely more on outside circumstances to help us to feel better. So we keep looking for an understanding from outside. Well, how do I feel right now? I don't know how I feel. How's everybody else feeling? Mm-hmm. And then we try to gauge on how everybody else is feeling. Or what should I do? Oh, I don't know what to do. What's everybody else doing? Or just reaching outside of ourselves. You know, we feel uncomfortable, and so what we do is we distract ourselves from that discomfort. And in distracting ourselves from the discomfort, we don't get to process what is really actually uncomfortable for it. Is it an unresolved emotion? Is it an intense conversation we just had with our loved one? Is it something that we're having a hard time managing in our life? And what the yoga tradition invites us to do, this thousands of year old tradition, is to create stillness, enough stillness in our life that we can tap into that source of our own inner knowing, our own intuitive mind, our own sense of well-being, our own inner resource of vitality. And that when we do that, our life, we're taking our life into our hands. We're not outsourcing ourselves anymore. And so that's what's most meaningful to me as I'm sharing what I've learned and what I've experienced. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. First of all, it is so beautiful in a way to wrap up just really how you're able to identify like some of the despondency that we do see and that we all feel, and it's like this willingness to actually recognize it too, because I think part of it is, some of the clients I come across are ladies, or a lot of times it's ladies that we've come across. It's like we're just trying to keep it together, and we're just trying to be present, so that, hey, I'm going to, even though there's some disconnect, and I could say it from personal experience too, there's times where there's a lot of disconnect, but how do I allow myself to still be present with my little boy who's playing or in the playground, or show that I'm happy even though there's something that doesn't feel well, right? And I think there's, or even just the bodies that I feel when I'm working with them, there's just so much intensity and contraction. And so how does, just to begin with, how does you bring in the tradition of yoga, how does that help with shifting the contraction that people may feel when they're feeling?
Oh yeah, great question. And I just wanted to say, for all of those of you who are mothers, just coming present in the moment with your loved one or with your child, that's one of the highest forms of yoga. That's it. You're coming into the present moment. And even as you are observing and taking care of your child that may be playing, you can keep checking in with yourself. You can ground. You can feel what it feels like to be in your body. You can still be aware of your child. You can draw it into your heart center, and you can feel that love that you have for your child, and you can start to shift your focus from whatever negative spin has been running in your mind, so that you can just be present in love, and that there starts to change your perception and experience. And so you can use your experience of mothering or fathering, if that's the case, to come into the present moment and to consciously come in with love. So that's one thing that I would say. And yoga, as it was originally taught, yoga means to yoke, to come into an integrated state of being between your body, your energy, your mind, and your awareness, and ultimately your soul, to come into an integrated state of being where you can feel whole, in other words. So what I love, and you asked earlier about Kundalini yoga, what I love about practices integrated practices, I'm going to call them, integrated practices that include movement, that include breath, that include often dynamic movement, which helps to change your brain. That includes sometimes mudras, ways that we direct energy, and sometimes mantras, sometimes words spoken that help to also harmonize and shift your mind. These kinds of practices, what they do is they can bring you into an integrated state very quickly. And so you're getting some physical movement, some strengthening, some flexibility. You're getting this change in your energetic state. You're getting, and that change in your energetic state can quickly shift your mind, and your mind becomes more receptive, more present, more able to feel and experience the moment, as opposed to constantly projecting forward in fear to the future, or projecting back in some level of remorse or disconnection from the past. So everything that yoga teaches us ultimately is how to come into a more whole state in the present moment. And when we do that, we really start to tap into that innate intelligence within us. and we start to live our lives from the inside out, not the outside in. So the practices are simple, actually, and you can do just a short, which for me, in these lives that we live now, and especially families, mothers, fathers, to have a quick practice that can help you to achieve those things, I think is where it's at, because of this feeling of not so much time in our life. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's beautiful. I think when you're talking about just the looking forward or looking back, that's a lot of where our minds go to. Even though I practice, it's like it's so easy to get caught up day to day with different experiences, and recently that realization of like there's an anticipation of messing up, the anticipation of what if something doesn't go well, or anticipation of like making sure something, like not, or just making sure that we can prevent a situation, trying to take control from, and it ties into our previous experiences too to shape us, and that's where the chatter is. It's like, the personal judgment towards ourselves or personal judgment towards others, and it's just we don't realize how chatter is such part of our everyday mind, or the busyness of our mind, until something that you described, yoga, in terms of the practice of Kundalini. That's something that my day may be very chaotic, and I know that other practitioners, like their day may be chaotic, but when there's just some sort of beautiful silence that you were describing earlier, to tap into the innate, and that happens during practice and even afterwards, and sometimes it's like it's such a great way to be able to set the tone for the rest of the day, just feel more connected. Is it something that happens immediately, or do you feel like that it could be or is it a consistency behind it? Because I realized that it's not, for me, it wasn't immediate.
Yes, I think the consistency is key, because if we are used to outside living, what I would call outside living, where we are attaining our sense of self by feeling that affirmation from the outside, that we're loved, that we're approved of, that we look okay, that whatever that is, and we're looking for our excitement from the outside, and we're looking for entertainment from the outside. It's like we're sort of culturally geared towards that. When we start to practice consistently, we begin to create a relationship with ourselves that's a lot deeper. We begin to learn how to move through uncomfortable emotions. We begin to learn how to quiet that monkey mind that's running back and forth. And in doing so, we start to get that sense of ourself. It's not something you can necessarily describe, but who's listening, you know what I mean when I say that sense of yourself. And the more we practice, the more we get to connect to and relate to that innate sense of ourself. And we start to align more with the guiding voice of that inner self. And life starts to feel more like a flow, less like an obstacle course. Absolutely. And so every day, if we're doing this, we're strengthening our capacity to reside in that essential core of ourself. And so all thoughts, all words, all actions start to flow from that place. And we get caught less in the polarity of should I, shouldn't I, is this right or is that right? We start to affirm ourselves more than seeking affirmation from the outside. And so it's hugely powerful to be doing this on a daily basis. Because me too, I didn't get it right away, because I used to dissociate from intensity of my young life emotional experiences. And so, I mean, I wasn't really home. And I had to learn how to make this body my home, how to make it a safe place, I had to learn how to not just ground and feel my muscles and stretch into my physical body, which is a huge part of yoga. We get to learn how to, take our attention to our left big toe, how to engage the deeper inner core muscles to, draw energy from the root. We get to learn how to just strengthen basic muscle groups and make them flexible. But we also get to learn how to feel our energy, not just emotion, which we feel in a certain way, but to start to sense our energetic state. So that's a huge one, and that takes time for many of us to be able to discern, well, wait, how's my energy different than my emotions, different than my physical body? And then we get to the next sort of level, if you like, is we get to begin to observe, connect to the witness within us, where we can observe all of our thoughts without identifying as the thoughts. Oh, that's an angry thought, but it doesn't mean I'm angry. Or, oh, that's a judgment, but that doesn't mean I'm judgmental. That's just a judgmental thought. So we start to learn how to sit in the seat of the witness. And what the yoga tradition states is, if we can master our mind, we can master the world. So all of the yoga, in a way, is to refine us physically, energetically, emotionally, until we can start to access our mind and begin to control our mind. And what I would say, maybe even better than control, is to befriend our mind. Because the mind and its thinking process is not something to be afraid of. It's not something, to be another reason we can judge ourselves. Oh, I always think that way. Or it's not that. It's just the mind and its mechanism of thinking can be so dominant in our life that if we really want to excel and thrive, we just need to learn how to harness the power of our mind to work for us and not against us. And if you, like me, come from a background of feeling insecure, having self-doubt, then when you start to harness the power of your mind, you can begin to overcome those negative self-deprecating tendencies and become more assured and firm in who you are and who you want to be and what you want to live into. So for me, that's why I love the tradition of yoga. It has its roots in this idea of coming to wholeness. And wholeness can mean subtly different things to all of us. But ultimately, I think when we're on a journey to seeking wholeness, those holistic paths lead us there.
Yeah. The way you describe it, it's like I think that's what we seek out churches for, right? We seek out religion is to feel like we are for that wholeness that you're describing, that connection. And there are people who are like, is yoga, I don't practice yoga, it's a religion, or it's or maybe it's outside my belief system, and it could be very much just a physical level. However, I don't think, based on how you're describing it too, I don't think a practice like yoga or in any form is to work against whatever faith someone has, right? It seems to,
yes.
It just seems to enhance the faith that you have in whatever it is that you are connected to and you feel drawn to. Can you speak more?
100%, yes. It is exactly that. There's because really when I think of yoga, I think of it as the handbook for the human being. It's like they lay out, what does it mean to be a human being? And then how do we master this being humanness? And so whatever our innate faith is, our innate relationship with the divine, that's included in this. It's an aspect of who we are and how we relate to the world and people around us. And then ultimately it's just for me, it was an utter revelation when I recognized that there was more to life than just my body and my mind. There's more to me. There is my soul. There is this like body of energy. And in the yoga tradition particularly, our energetic body is key because when we can change and stabilize and harmonize our energy, it influences all the different physical systems and it influences the mind. So it influences on a grosser level and it influences on a subtler level. And so we just become a more refined instrument. And my experience in that is that when I'm living in a more refined, more present, more conscious, more aware way, I'm struggling less. And even if I'm challenged in life, I'm able to overcome the challenge a lot more quickly. If I react to something in life, I'm able to pull back from my reaction and get conscious more and more quickly. And so life stops feeling like it's happening to me. Life starts to feel like it's happening for me and through me because of the level of awareness that I'm creating on a daily level. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just how you were talking about the movement of the body, or just how we are changing the energetic level of our body in turn to change our mind, and even in the physiological level. I think it's just a reminder that for myself and even for the listeners, we don't have to approach the yoga practices with this, oh, I'm going to have this great spiritual awakening. It is also cleaning up your vehicle of your body. It can come from as simple as that. And what's something that's beautiful just in the movement and breath itself is, from personal experiences, sometimes there isn't like a lesson book of today you're going to learn this. Like somehow that innate that you're talking to, like that voice that is just always cheering us on, that always kind of urges us to do more, kind of pushes us forward. I think there's something beautiful behind that. Like is like there's that clarity of how you can, like suddenly we may just act or make choices differently. So how do you connect, like when people hear innate, what is that innate voice to you versus like the chatter voice? What's the difference between the two for a person that maybe has a hard time distinguishing that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. For me, it's that place of just knowing. You know something, and it comes quickly. And so that I would say is the core voice that I listen to in my life, and I would call that intuition. It's just that sense of knowing. And the more I practice and I clear the chatter, the stronger that intuitive voice gets. That's the voice of knowing. And then there's the voice of guidance that is a learned voice. That for me, it's like my elder sister, metaphorically speaking, within me, who is guiding me to make better choices. Last time you did that, it wasn't so good for you, so maybe make a different choice. So there's that kind of voice, and I would call that in many ways, like, to me, she's the voice of my conscience. And she's the one who's guiding me along the path of my values and along the path of what I have learned from my own direct experience, and therefore, what that direct experience has guided me toward. Oh, if I drink coffee every morning, I end up not feeling well. Or if I keep eating that cake, I don't feel well. So whatever the voice is, or I don't want to get into that kind of relationship again. That hasn't served me. So for me, there's two kind of main counsels that I follow. That for sure I've refined my relationship with them through the practices.
That's wonderful. So what's the counterpart of that then? the counterpart behind the guidance voice and the intuitive voice, because I feel like there is a counterpart where we feel our knowing and then, or we know, and then all of a sudden there's that second guessing, like, oh no, I don't know if there is that you're, I mean, I feel like that's where the chatter is too. It's just like, well, that's not there. Like, and how do we navigate away from that voice and to really be clear behind the guidance and the innate voice in that sense?
Yeah, you know, what I feel when you say that is, I feel like it's the difference between the head and the heart.
Yes.
And, you know, the heart really is the source of consciousness, at least that's the way it's described in the yoga tradition, that the heart is the source of consciousness. And the heart knows, and the mind thinks. And so the heart knows, but then the mind might chip in and start the dialogue and the comparison of, oh, well, this time or that time. So ultimately, closing our eyes, connecting to our heart, taking deep breaths, coming into a space of gratitude, appreciation for the moment, and then asking ourselves the question again. And I come from, in my 20s and 30s, I was constantly in that dance of split between the two. It was excruciating for me to be able to make a decision. And so to get to a place of knowing feels like it's just, I'm so grateful to develop that capacity now in my life. So getting still and quiet, coming into my awareness and appreciation and gratitude, so my energetic frequency elevates, then I can start to feel more clearly what it is that my heart is desiring, and follow that. And if I can't decide, my methodology these days is that I don't make the decision until it comes from that place of knowing. And it's not always in my time, therefore. It has its own timing where something starts to click and it's like, oh yeah, I want to do that. And so sometimes we don't have the luxury of giving ourselves that kind of time, and we need to make a quicker decision, but that's the methodology that seems to be working for me right now.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think it's just like the consistency that you were talking about in practice over time, that suddenly there is that sudden need to respond and don't need to have like the whole depth of coming out of a big practice to do it. It becomes more in tuned. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the action and movement of it. You know, there are so many different practices of yoga, and would you say that for Kundalini, why would a family, why would a mom or a dad feel like they want to be able to start integrating their practice? And does it have to be as in-depth as like a very long session in the busyness of our life? Like, what can that look like for our practitioner?
Yes, I think what it could look like is spending like 20 or 30 minutes together in the morning to practice. It could be less, but 20 minutes to 30 minutes gives you enough time to do some dynamic movements, just rolling the body with the breath, some strengthening postures, a little bit of targeted breath work that can lift your energy and balance your mind, and an opportunity to ground in that state of presence that you create. Because when you start to move your body, and especially moving your body integrated with breath, and you start to add a few more very targeted breath techniques, very quickly all the things that were bothering you when you sat down start to dissolve. That kind of heavy energy you might have shown up to practice with dissolves. That anger that you just had with your partner before you sat down starts to dissolve. And by the time you get to 20 minutes or 30 minutes, you're like, what were we arguing about again? Like, what was that big problem? You literally, your consciousness state has shifted. Your awareness is broader. You're not looking just at the problem anymore. You're experiencing something bigger. And it just bodes well then, because we start to live our lives from a more connected place. I know many families who practice in this way.
Yes.
They practice as a couple, and they practice and they include their children. And what's fun about lots of community practices is that there are these dynamic movements that can be made into fun, and kids enjoy them, and they get involved. And then when they're bored, they go off, and that's fine. I think to allow them to come and engage at the level that works for them, and to be able to leave when it doesn't work for them, maybe stay in the same room if you keep an eye on them, but I think that's a healthy way to be inclusive in your family so that everybody gets to experience what it is that you're doing. And from what I see, children really respond to that. They respond to the inclusiveness, they respond to how you shift and open through your practice. And so that becomes attractive to them.
That's beautiful. It's like that's where the magic happens, is that inclusivity, or just even that unsaid shift that happens, even if it's not like a pristine yoga journal practice that we expect, right? Our kids are running off, there's noises or something, like how do we stay grounded for that? And so I think that's beautiful.
I've seen that so often when students share their little time-lapse videos of them doing a Kriya, and you see, they're doing a Kriya, maybe their arms are moving, and the kid comes up, and they stop, and they chat with the kid, and then they go back, and then the kid comes and climbs on top of them, and it's still doing what they're doing, and then the kid dies down, and it, to me, it brings me so much joy to see people who are practicing in that way and bringing the joy in so that it doesn't have to be something that's so rigid and disciplined. It's like there's a just innate joyfulness in the attitude too. And sure, if we want to do a deeper internal breath and meditation, then we might ask for quiet time or time out so that we can do that. But to be inclusive, especially when you're in the movement part, so much fun.
Yes, absolutely. And I think from the beginner level too, it's just sometimes you don't even need to know what's the actual energetic changes that's happening, but just the engagement of your hands. Because how often do we want to, because we're angry, we just want to shake it out, right? Or we're so happy, we're so joyous, but we're just, I need to keep my cool for some reason, or something. But I think there's something beautiful about even the exercises, the Kriya that we do. There's this like, I'm pulling my energy in, yes, I'm doing this, and there's something so dynamic behind that even if it's just like interrupted, there's still that allowing the body, allowing the mind to change in that sense too. It's like waking up the brain, like you were saying earlier in the show, like it's shifting the neurology. I'm curious how, from your perspective and when you're teaching to your students, what is happening in the brain? Like, because Kundalini is known to be it changes the neurology. That's what I feel like part of it's known for, is like it shifts the brain. And so how do you language that, or what is actually happening that with the movements and the breath and even the sound?
Well, whenever we pay attention in a different way, we're already changing the neurology.
Yes.
And so as we practice and as we change our energetic state, and when we pay attention, we start to rewire the brain to what it is paying attention to. As they say, and as we do certain exercises, we fire the neurons that relate to that exercise. As they say, the neurons that fire together, wire together, so we create these new neural pathways that reflect the exercises that we're doing. And so we might do something, for example, where we hold the arms for, a couple of minutes in one position. And then what happens is that as you're holding them there, when you reach discomfort in the pose and you react, you get to see where your own self-imposed limitations are. Like how much discomfort is okay and how much isn't, just in the way you were wired to that point. And what is the story you tell yourself about yourself when you're being asked to hold your arms up? Is the story, one of defeat, one of I never will do this, or is it one of reaction? I dislike this, I really hate this, I don't like this teacher, I don't like this thing, and so we just get to see when we're challenged and the nervous system is reflecting challenge, how do we react to that? And as we hold a position, we learn not to take the position personally. It's not about me, it's not about how good I am, how bad I am, it's not about comparing myself to the person next to me or the person who's teaching. It's just about learning to be with a level of discomfort. And then what has been shown scientifically now is that where you place your attention is where you place your energy. If you pay attention to the discomfort you're feeling in your arms, the discomfort starts to get bigger and bigger. But if you pay attention to your breath, or you pay attention to the feeling of possibility, then lo and behold, what starts to happen is your experience changes. And the limitations that you felt and the limitations that were defining you in the moment when you were feeling them shift. When those limitations shift and you start to perceive things differently, then your neurons start to fire differently. And you start to rewire yourself. So it's like you get to upgrade the programs that you have created in your life about what you feel is possible and what isn't. And we get a little bit more unlimited every time we do that. We get a little bit more powerful every time we do that. And until, things like holding your arms up for 2 or 3 minutes, they don't become personal to you anymore. You're able to just do it and understand why you're doing it. Your nervous system has shifted and changed to support you in that. Your neurology, the way your brain is firing, is supporting you in that. And so imagine when you get into the habit of doing that, just how different you start to show up in life. Because you've now had an experience of going beyond your own limitations, and you start to trust yourself to do that. That's part of the neuroplasticity of the brain that happens when you change your experience of yourself. So that's my, I guess that's one way I would speak to that. Not being a neuroscientist, but being a practitioner. And I've learned from my experience of doing these things and witnessing others.
Yes. I mean, just how you described it, I could experience it in my own body, just how you beautifully described it. And I think it's a great full circle in what we've been discussing this whole segment of our show is all of a sudden the chatter in the mind becomes so loud because we're challenged, and then at the same time, at that moment, learning to be so present with that chatter and saying, how do we shift our mind, like you're saying, and shifting our perspective. And so oftentimes the chatter is all the realization now is just like, oh, that's the limitation that we have that's there. But when you practice, there is the possibilities that you can experience over time. And that learning to be present with our child on the playground happens naturally because we've learned to be present in the practice because of the discomfort. So there's so much behind what you were just saying there. I'm like, oh, wiring's clicking.
I love it.
That's so awesome. And so you are doing some really great educational journeys for practitioners. I know that people can find you through Glow. For even practitioners that want to go deeper, you offer programs like for that as well too. How can our listeners find you? Because obviously, in order to help people get into the experience, the practitioner, the teacher, has to help with that magic, to facilitate that magic.
Oh, well, thank you, yes. So my website, kiamiller.com, you can find out what I'm doing, the events that I'm doing, and so I offer a variety of different things. When the pandemic started, I shifted, as we all did, all of my attention online, and I started to do these at-home retreats where you get to immerse yourself in 2 practices a day for 4 days. Is the next one coming up, I think September 23rd. It's an opportunity to have a taste of the practices in your own home, so that you, but you're in a community, so you're committed to doing them. You set the time aside like you would if you were going on a retreat. And then you do the classes, but you're still with your family, and you get to integrate your experiences in a very real way. So that's one way that I invite people in, and I make that available literally to anybody. So it's a pay what you can, because I understand that that often the cost of yoga can be prohibitive. So I want to make sure that there are some offerings that I do that are inclusive to absolutely everybody. And then I teach teacher training. So for people who want to really learn the methodology and to really get to the how and the why things work, then I offer teacher trainings like the classic 200-hour, and then I have 300-hour trainings, which are actually, interestingly, the more advanced you get, I allow people anybody to come to those trainings, anybody who's interested. And the reason is that to become a more advanced practitioner is just to work through your own direct experience. And so then I offer these 8-day modules where you come in and you really delve into a specific topic. Like, if you want to learn about really how the breath works and all the great stuff that's come out about the Navy SEALs using certain breath techniques, about Wim Hof's techniques, and actually now almost countless others that are all reflecting the efficacy of the breath and the power of the breath to transform our experience of life. So I do a whole module on the breath. I do a whole module on understanding the mind, how it works, and meditation. I do a module on Kriya, what we call Kriya, which is these sequences of dynamic movement and breath, mantra, mudra, and how they work, and which Kriyas work in which way, and how to choose optimally for yourself or for others you may be guiding. And then one on mantra, so understanding the power of sound to change your consciousness. And then another one, a self-mastery module, which really looks to the idea of how to live skillfully, how to live more skillfully, how to bring the awareness and that which we learn on the mat, so to speak. How do we bring that out and live it in our lives, much like you've been talking of as a mother. You know, you bring what you learn and you start to see how much more present you can be with your child. Like, that to me is the next level of the yogic practice, is that it becomes part of just our everyday life. So those are ways that people can dive in with me. I'm offering a couple of live events a year right now. I have one coming up in India in March next year. Should that be possible? I don't know.
Yes.
I'm living in the world of possibility until I'm told not. And then this Glow Yogic Family, where I teach live every week on glow.com, just GLO. And I have some 40-day courses there, which you can do where you are led through an experience for 40 days, so you start to learn that consistency of practice. And I wanted to make them powerful but accessible. So there's one that's 30 minutes a day, and you really get to work. I think you've done that one. You really get to work in these powerful dynamic movements to change your state of consciousness and get you connected there, and then learn how to stabilize that energy over, a period of days and weeks. So those are all available on Glow. So yeah, different ways to get involved.
Yes, it's all how beautiful, and personally, I'm like, yes, how can I do the modules and make that available right now? So thank you so much, Kia. What a gift to be able to have you on the show, and thank you for our families who are tuning in. And I hope everyone has a beautiful day, and we're able to take some really great resources, great knowledge. I think there's a lot of golden nuggets in our show today. And I will post all the different resources that Kia had also listed earlier on our Facebook page as well too. And thank you again, Kia, for joining us. And the question I love to be able to ask everybody before we go is, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care.
What a blessing. Thank you so much.
Yes.